always grateful for the opportunities to connect through the ethers, across space and in the right time to be together. So thank you so much for joining us. For those of you who may be joining who have not joined us before on a beautiful Free Friday webinar on healing, my name is Dr. Shamini Jan. I am the founder and president of the Consciousness and Healing Initiative, a beautiful collaborative that brings together leading healers and change makers in biofield science, healing, innovation. And what they all really have in common is a beautiful presence and ability to share wisdom from the healing perspective from many different vantage points. And today's guest is an absolute expert in the relationship between dreaming, manifestation, and healing. We have with us today Bonnie Buckner, and I'll tell you a little bit about Bonnie before we dive into the conversation. And yes, hello for all of you who are jumping in on the chat saying where you're coming from. So great to hear from you. We've got Ohio, we've got Cleveland, we've got Virginia, Florida, New York City, a lot of US based people today. Thank you so much for being with us. Let me tell you a little bit about Bonnie before we jump into the conversation today. She's the founder and CEO of the International Institute for Dreaming and Imagery. She's also the author of The Secret Mind: Unlock the Power of Dreams to Transform Your Life. She's a creative dream work expert and uses an ancient method of dreaming to teach people, both individually and in organizations, how to work with the power of dreams to transform and creatively imagine, reimagine our lives and the world we share. I couldn't think of a more relevant topic for today's times. Of course, in her work, she brings together insights and vocabulary from cognitive psychology, neurobiology, and creativity. And it's interesting because she also uses this as a method to help foster leadership and uses it in creative coaching. Um, so I'm really, really excited for the conversation today. Dreams can sometimes be so mystifying, and yet so many of us know what good medicine dreams can be, how they can open new possibilities for ourselves and our world at such a critical time. So, Bonnie, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
It's really an honor and so well timed to be having this conversation. So, you talk about dreaming good dreams, dreaming great dreams, actually, dreaming
Great
great
dreams.
dreams. What does that mean to you? Why do you use that term?
Well, so the lineage of dreaming that I teach thinks about dreams as having 7 different kinds. So we have unresolved dreams and we have resolved dreams. The unresolved dreams, there's a nightmare, there's a repetitive nightmare, a busy dream, and a clear dream. And these dreams are, there's an imbalance in them somewhere, and they're asking for us to dialogue to bring them to balance. I'll come back to that in a minute. And then there's great dreams, dreams of light, and dreams of union. And those are resolved dreams. So, on one level, dreaming is the language of our experience. So, that's an experience that's physical, it's emotional, it's mental, it's spiritual. And dreaming is that inner language. So if I'm dreaming an unresolved dream, it's my body's mechanism of talking to me about an imbalance in my life. In one of those 4, I call them bodies, it's just 4 different aspects of our beingness.
Hmm.
If I'm dreaming a great dream or a dream of light or dream of union, I'm balanced, meaning I've resolved an inner conflict. I'm in a space where I can truly receive something bigger. So you started by talking about the times that we're living in. Whatever we're living on the outside, we're the creators of that, and we're creating it from the inside. And so when we can resolve our own, do our own inner housekeeping, let's say, then we can open ourselves to seeing beyond where we are today, to seeing a much bigger picture, to making a much bigger connection, whether that's just an experience of great love, if that's an experience of getting a message from your dreams, if it's an experience of becoming one and experiencing that feeling, that sensation of oneness. And these resolved dreams are so critical because especially, you brought up, where we are today. There's a lot of turbulence in the world today, and it's really difficult for people to imagine beyond it right now. But the more time we spend constricted and thinking about problems, the more we energize that. So the more we can open ourselves to having great dreams and seeing and feeling and experiencing beyond it, the more we can energize that. If we see it, we can create it.
So, what is the origin of a great dream? Where does it come from?
I mean, that's mystery, isn't it?
Mm.
Where does love come from? I don't know. And I think it's really great that we don't know because we're all, just channeling in some way through our human vessel so many different pieces of information and experiences from around the world, from our lifetimes, and how that gets put together and how we understand all of that is the great mystery. And it's important to confront mystery, I think, because again, that's also the key. You talked about my work in leadership, and in leadership, people always talk about innovation. It's literally stepping into the mystery of being able to step beyond what is and be okay to sit in that question mark and allow something new to come in.
I love it. Yeah, it's so resonant. I asked that trick question because I think people sometimes think, oh, all I have to do is make myself dream a great dream. And from what I'm understanding about the approach, and as from what we know about how creativity and expansion of consciousness occurs, it is indeed giving into that great mystery, right? So when I hear you talking about dreaming great dreams, what comes to my mind is the creative download, right? That's how I experience, perhaps what you're talking about with dreaming the great dream. It's when we can actually settle ourselves a little bit to be in a place of receptivity and surrender to the unknown, that a great dream might come through us, right? And it really is a coming through, isn't it? It's not necessarily something that we're forcing. As you know, in your work, you can't force creativity. You can't force a new way of thinking. You have to kind of surrender and open to it. And it sounds like that's part of the process, maybe, of dreaming the great dream. Yeah.
Yeah, so the origins of this lineage is the esoteric Judaism, Kabbalah. And Kabbalah is a word that means receive. And so part of the big question the Kabbalists grapple with is receive what and how. And so this particular tradition looks at dreams and inner imagery as one of those ways of receiving. And then everything after that, which is the interpreting or the bringing into form of what we've received.
Beautiful. And, would love to hear more about the origins. So interesting and intriguing to know of the origins of this practice in those ancient traditions of Kabbalah. Um, and many of us may not be fully even knowledgeable, although many of us as you know, part of the Chi audience are highly knowledgeable about so many different spiritual traditions. But for those who may not be as familiar with Kabbalah, can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, it's the esoteric arm, if you will, of Judaism. And this particular lineage derives from the 13th century from two rabbis in the Mediterranean who were cousins. They passed this knowledge down family member to family member to the modern teacher of this work, Madame Colette Muscat. And she then taught many students, modernized it for a modern audience, and I studied for over 10 years with her student, Dr. Catherine Schoenberg.
Oh, wow, how beautiful. And so what brought you to that work? I'm so curious. And Kabbalah is such an incredible system of wisdom, teaching many, many aspects, right, of spiritual development, spiritual progress. What drew you to the dream work in particular?
So that's a little bit of a story because I didn't choose that. You talked about where the whole conversation today is about receiving in some way or another. And I knew from when I was 3 years old that I would be working with dreams in some way.
Wow.
I had had a dream and several nightmares that were very disturbing. And I just was having a conversation with myself as a 3 year old. What can I do to never sleep? Because it was just so disturbing to have these nightmares, you know? And as I kind of went through different thoughts in my mind, suddenly it occurred to me, oh, that's why I'm here. I'm here to figure out how to deal with my nightmares, and then I'm going to teach other people how to do that. So that understanding was, kind of always hanging out with me, even though I studied different things in school, and I didn't know how to formalize that necessarily.
Mhm.
And my father and my grandmother, and this is really important, they were super supportive of this, my whole family. But in particular, my father and my grandmother were great dreamers themselves and told me many stories. And my father would, whenever I would be sick, he would tell me, he would give me imagery exercises to talk to my body, to help my body to heal. And there was just this complete openness of how our body speaks to us and how to speak back to it.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. And so then as an adult, that I had this dream that to me feels like a visitation. Again, it's a big mystery, it's a big question mark. I don't know where this came from. But my father, who had passed away at that time, I meet in some kind of mystical place, and he hands me over to a woman who has this hair in a bun and this golden phonograph. And I realized, oh, that's going to be my teacher. That's my dream teacher. And so there were a series of steps after that that brought me to the person, Catherine Shainberg, Dr. Shainberg, that I learned this from. And later I realized I saw a picture of Colette, and it was Colette in my dream.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that personal story. Deeply touched by it. And yeah, it's so resonant with many people's experiences, whether it's scientists like Einstein that have said they've received inspiration in a dream, or I'm thinking of, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Sri Aurobindo and the mother and their spiritual teachings, but how the mother met Sri Aurobindo in the dream before she, was guided to go and
Mm,
meet him.
beautiful.
So, and you talk about this, you talk about how we're dreaming all the time, actually. And we're familiar, we wake up from the dream, life is a dream. So, given your experiences in such early childhood and, and kind of and I just want to add how wonderful that your family was, because they had their own practice and they had their own experiences, able to shepherd you through, something that might have felt traumatic or worrisome for parents into normalizing that and harmonizing that into a great gift. What a beautiful story. And thank you for sharing that story. So,
Yeah.
through this journey, where you first came to the work almost through a shock, let's say, to recognizing it as the medicine that it is, and all the experience that you have in working with dreams for yourself and for others. How do you understand this? How do you understand this whole term that life is a dream, and this idea of the waking state versus the sleeping state and the threads of consciousness that tie those together?
Yeah. There's a few different ways that I look at that. If you think about it, we open our eyes every morning and we encounter a world of images. But a tree, for example, is more than just a tree. It's energy, and it's an expression of energy in a very specific way. It's rootedness, it's reaching up and reaching down at the same time and spreading out. Rock, we call it a rock, but rock is an expression, an image of energy that's durable, timeless, long lasting. We forget that, and we just go around and sort of glibly say tree, rock.
Right.
And that's when we get caught in illusion because we forget that behind that, there's source and there's energy, and that these are expressing energy in a very specific way. We ourselves are this little bundle of energy expression, also. So, when we start to understand that life is a dream, I mean that in two different ways. On a very easy level, whatever I'm dreaming at night, I'm living in the day. What I'm living in the day, I'm dreaming at night. So if I've just had an argument with my boss, I may have a nightmare that's showing me that I have anger or my energies are tied up in fear or some kind of inner conflict. So all dreams are informative. Actually, nightmares can be really great friends because it gives us that window. If you think about it, we don't know what the back of ourself looks like. It takes a series of mirrors to understand that.
Mhm.
So a dream is kind of that mirror. It's showing us our inside, not the part of ourself that was, involved in that argument and yelling back, but the reflective inner side that understands that in a much bigger context and a much bigger way. So that's one way. But the other way is that big idea of dream, which is what I decide to say about my inside, what I decide to put into action about my inside, creates the world I'm experiencing and the world I'm living. So if I ignore, for example, the nightmare and I continue to perpetuate that conflict, I am dreaming
Mm.
that life of conflict. It's how I choose to, I use the word interpret, and it's not in the Freudian sense of interpreting, it's what I put my mouth to and say, I'm going to, resolve this, or I'm still so angry. That's just created two different worlds. We can either create a relationship or destroy a relationship just with how I'm interpreting what my inner experience is.
Mm. I really love that. And, maybe you can share some practical wisdom and insights for those who do struggle with bad dreams and nightmares. In my tradition of clinical psychology, I used to work with veterans and doing a practice that was actually, I think, kind of aligned maybe with some of what you do, called imagery rehearsal therapy. And so what we would have them do is take that nightmare and actually rewrite it. So they would write down what the nightmare was, but we would give it a different ending. And this is empirically supported, lots of research
Oh, yeah.
that shows that this can really help. And it was a way for them to process in the waking state the content that was coming to them in the dream. And in these cases, these were veterans with post-traumatic stress. So sometimes it was literally like a memory, really, right,
Hmm.
of something that was happening. It wasn't even just a projection. It was intrusive thoughts coming to them in the night through the form of a nightmare. So even though they may have experienced that explosion on a ship or whatever it was that they were, rehearsing in the night, when we got them to in the conscious mind state, so we're not talking about a lucid dreaming approach, but in the waking dream, to rewrite it and to go into the imagery of it, to dream about it in the day,
Hmm.
to dream about it with their waking state, their nightmare began to shift and eventually just didn't show up. So I mentioned that as just a way that, I'm aware of where we can really connect these states and address things like nightmares. Like sometimes people who have nightmares think, "Oh my God, there's nothing I can do." But you're pointing to a way that there's a very tangible way that we can work with the waking dream state, yeah, to influence.
Yeah, and in fact, we do an exercise called the waking dream, and it's very simple. It's really a matter of closing your eyes and you do a couple of, exhales and then return to the dream. And by returning to the dream in a conscious awake state, one knows that one can bring in all the tools of the imagination to shift the image. And it's working with the spontaneous imagery. And what I mean by that is rather than desiring an outcome or writing a script of what I'm going to do, I simply go in and interact with those images. And just that interaction will shift it. What you're talking about, this repetitive nightmare, this reliving of memory, is there's something stuck there and it's waiting for an interaction, kind of like being stuck on a record, right? In the groove, and it's waiting just to be picked up and put into a different place. So, by returning to our body's inner healing mechanism of imagery and interacting with it, we can shift it. So, an example, just to give people the assurance that we do all have the tools inside of ourselves to do this. Um, I worked with somebody who had an end of the world dream. There was no more oxygen. It was the end of the world. Everything was frozen. And they found this tiny little glimmer of light. It was a candle under the ice. And they walked up to the candle and they found that if they cupped their hands around the candle, they could breathe. So they wake up. It's a terrible nightmare. We work with it. And all that was needed is we did a waking dream exercise. The person goes back in with the idea of what is the necessity. The necessity is to bring up that light, to unencumber the light so it can shine. And that's it. There was no, this is how you're going to do it. This is, the right way to do it. Nothing. Just that's the necessity. And
Mm-hmm.
the person goes in and suddenly, this Russian icebreaker, those giant ships, is there and just like bangs into the ice. And suddenly they're in this, colorful flower meadow. And this person said, I kind of thought I was going in with a little ice chipper. I didn't expect this big Russian icebreaker. And
Wow.
that's the really the just most wonderful thing about our bodies and our inner healing mechanism. Really, it's waiting for us to make that connection, to just go back inside, and then it responds in kind.
I love it. Let's talk a little bit maybe more about the central aspect of images. I'm thinking of the initial part of our conversation, where do great dreams come from? We dive into the mystery. And sometimes for those of us who haven't done a lot of work in imagery, like I love how you explained that the person may have thought that they were going to come in with an ice chipper, but what actually happened was different. And you say that imagery is a way that connects the conscious mind with healing. So maybe you could talk a little bit more about that, whether it's from working with images in dreams or working with images in the waking state, that imagery is clearly perhaps reflective of consciousness, the mind, maybe subconscious and conscious, ways of providing information. And yet, there's no manipulation really of that at all.
No.
There is, again, an allowing, right? An allowing of that information to come to us through imagery. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, we're partners in our own creating. We're not just stuck in this human body and wound up and said, go. We are partners with our body and with all of that, what that entails beyond the physical. So we're asked to dialogue with that. And so, kind of, from the Kabbalist tradition, creation sort of follows a process. It begins with an impulse, comes to an image place, we get an emotional investment in it, and then we take action on it. And from neuroscience and cognitive psychology, image is the origin of action. So, very, very simple. I'm not going to go to the refrigerator to look at something until I kind of have an impulse. Maybe I'm a little hungry and I get this image in my mind. Oh, yeah, there's that apple that I left in there. And then I walk to the refrigerator, I take action. I'm invested in the apple, I get it. So, images are our body's really truly language of experience, and it's precognitive. We so often put words to these inner images without knowing it. They come out as metaphors and similes and things like this, like, oh my gosh, I feel like I've been pushing a rock uphill all day. Well,
Mm-hmm.
look inside. I'm pushing a rock uphill.
Mm-hmm.
So when we get facile with this language of images, we realize that because that's the point of action, if I return to image, then I move in an active way. It's not about a thinking about healing myself, it's just healing myself.
How does this relate to the practice of lucid dreaming, which many people are into and know something about, right? This idea of almost directing the dream through imagery. What do you
Yeah.
think of the practice?
Well, everybody loves lucid dreaming these days. It's kind of the rock star of dreaming. And the way I think about lucid dreaming is it's the idea of waking up to oneself. And so the goal from this, lineage's perspective is to become lucid all the time, to be lucid to my waking time, to the images that are moving through me and the intuitions and the insights that I'm getting in my waking time at the same time that I'm becoming lucid to my dreaming at night. And more than just being lucid to it, like, oh, hey, I'm dreaming, that's really cool, and I know it, but I can do something with it. It's the doing something with it where we really, well, for lack of a better phrase, we turbocharge our ability to make change.
Mm. Why do you why do you think that is? Is it just because it provides a clarity of mind and energy that, it's like a point of focus?
Well, if you think about it, we kind of sleepwalk through a lot of our life. If you choose a period in life when maybe things were really busy and it's kind of difficult to distinguish one day from the other. I don't know. That period when we were moving was just a blur, for example, right? Or people get into routines in their job and they don't vary them, and the weeks sort of become a blur. It's like sleepwalking. And so when we wake up to our life, we wake up to our dreaming, it's great practice to wake up in our dreams, then we can wake up to the fact that we're creating what we're living, and we can become very intentional about that.
So, given the state of the world, we would say then we've created the nightmares that we're seeing in the waking world, right? They're clear nightmares in the waking world. And there's a heaviness, there's a despondency, there's a sense of powerlessness with all that is happening. And so conceptually, many of us feel like, yeah, wow, we created this. Like we know on some level, we know that we have created this. There's some resistance to that too. There's some people saying, well, I didn't create this. This isn't my dream. I had nothing to do with this. Um, but there's an invitation here, perhaps, and from your point of view, given the current, daily nightmares that we might be faced with, whether witnessing those um, or in them ourselves in today's very heavy times, what role do you see the dream time and tapping into the power of dreams being to help harmonize our current world?
So I don't see our current world as a nightmare. I see it as a clear dream. So a clear dream shows us our block, our potential, and also how to get over that block. Because it is true, there's a tremendous amount of turbulence happening in the world today. But this has spurred a tremendous amount of healing initiatives like yours, like all the people who are out there saying, wow, this is a moment for us to gather and really start to do things. It's both at the same time. And so one of the things that this dreaming work, because it's more than just, I'm having a dream. There's ways, very specific ways that we work with dreams. And one of those ways is learning how to find the good and grow the good, to recognize the necessity and address the necessity. There's always, turbulence in the world. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less, but there's good also. And it's really important for us to recognize that. And some of the work that I do with leaders is to address that despondency that you talked about. And it's just human nature. It's so quick when I'm leading a workshop or something and I start going around to ask people. I do a little prompt and I go around to ask people their thoughts or what they've seen. And within the first like two answers, people just collapse into groupthink. And
Mm.
that's why this dreaming and this creative work is so critical, because we're all meant to bring those unique ideas that each of us is having, because we're all, channeling this world energy through our very unique vessel.
Mhm.
And it's only when we put words to that, action to that, that we can start to move things in a different way.
Beautiful. And I love the reframe of, the nightmare to a clear dream, a clear dream. And thank you for all that you're doing to help support people um, to, kind of see things with more clear eyes and recognize that the polarity, recognize the polarity and where the polarity is in some ways you can say illusory, right? It's just part of the divine illusion here. And yet there are many, many ways to use the faculties of the mind and creativity to address what we're seeing in the clear dream, right? To address that.
I mean, it's like the work that you talked about earlier with people, veterans, people suffering from PTSD, learning how to see beyond that. How do we move the imagination? Because everything has been imagined. We've imagined everything that we're living in, be it fashion, media, governments, education. It's come from the imagination. And when I learned that my imagination is flexible and it's connected to source, so it's infinite, and I discipline myself to move out of the nightmare and to allow those ideas to come through, then we can generate new ways of living our world.
I know I didn't ask you this earlier, so I hope I'm not putting you on the spot, but I'm wondering if there is a practice that we might be able to do together to have the experience of what we've been discussing, and this beautiful discussion that we've been having now for a bit. I also want to remind people that are joining us here on Zoom that if you have a question for Bonnie, it's one of the beautiful opportunities that we have to have these experts with us and ask them questions in real time. And so toward the end of the hour, we will be able to have Bonnie answer some of the questions that you may ask. If you look at the Q&A box on the bottom of your screen, if you're joining us here on Zoom, you can ask your question for Bonnie directly in the Q&A and we will get to it. But perhaps before we do that, would you be willing to take us through a practice?
Yeah, we can do a very easy clearing exercise. It's a beautiful exercise that I do every morning. So I invite everybody to close their eyes. You can look down softly or close your eyes and just imagine that as you exhale, you're exhaling a thin gray smoke. And from that thin gray smoke, it's carried out of you everything that tires you, that obscures you, that keeps you from seeing clearly. And allow that thin gray smoke to travel out and into nature that knows how to absorb and compost it, clean it. And just continue to exhale this thin gray smoke, and you don't have to see each of the things. Just know that as you exhale, it's being carried out. All of the things that tire you, obscure you, keep you from seeing clearly. And then turn your focus to your inhale and see that you inhale from the bluest part of the sunlit sky, this golden blue light, and see it enter your nostrils, spill down the back of your throat and down your back and into your legs, all the way down to the ends of your toes, filling your toes, your feet, ankles, and legs with golden blue light. And then inhale again this golden blue light, seeing it enter your nostrils, spill down the back of your throat and down your back to fill your pelvic bowl and your abdomen with this golden blue light. And inhale again this golden blue light, seeing it enter your nostrils, spill down the back of your throat and into your chest cavity, and filling your chest cavity so much with golden blue light, it begins to spill across your collarbones, your shoulders, and down your arms and into your fingers, all the way down to the very tips of your fingers, filling your hands, your arms, shoulders, and chest with golden blue light. And inhale again, still more of this golden blue light, seeing it enter your nostrils and spill down the back of your throat and into all four chambers of your heart. See this golden blue light turning your heart into a lamp of golden blue light, shining out this golden blue light in every direction. And then inhale still more of this golden blue light, filling all of your body, your cells, and the spaces between the cells with this golden blue light. Seeing it radiating out of your fingers, your toes, like tendrils of golden blue light, till you become a vase of golden blue light. Then breathe out and open your eyes and see it for a moment with open eyes. Okay.
What a beautiful practice. Very unique practice, from my perspective, one that I've never done before.
Hmm.
Um, and love people's reflections in the chat if you'd like. That was such a beautiful practice. I could really feel the energy. It was interesting to kind of um, focus the mind on that specific imagery of golden blue
Mm.
light while feeling the vibration of it, at the same time. That's kind of a part of my reflection. Sheila's mentioning how much she loves this practice. Um, yes, yes, lots of gratitude here um, for the practice. And so you mentioned you do this every morning.
I do this practice every morning. Um, I will make this little note. It's a great practice to do every morning. It's energizing, so it's better to do it in the morning instead of the evening. For women, stop during the time that you're menstruating. So when we're menstruating, we're cleaning already, and this is a cleaning, clearing exercise, so it doesn't need to happen during that time. So just pause during that time and then start again.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, okay. The inquiring mind in me wants to know the blue aspects from your tradition, the gold and the blue, um, the decision to focus on those particular rays. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
How did that feel to you?
Yeah. Well, my mind, is very conceptual and active. So the gold, I could feel, I'd say more, and
Okay.
definitely felt that cleansing and clearing. The blue, my mind immediately jumped to the etheric body, and so
Mm.
I wondered if one of the reasons that blue color is used here is to connect us back to the etheric, which I've learned from my teacher, Reverend Rosalind Briere, is, basically the template of perfection, right? Or essentially the truth. So, but those are just the traditions that I know something about. I don't know anything about Kabbalah, so curious.
Yeah, it's cleansing and it's a high vibration. Um, you know, if you play in the rainbow, every one of the colors has a different physical experience to it. You
Mhm.
know, red is more dense and hot, and orange is pretty buzzy. So this cleansing blue is both energizing but not buzzy, let's say.
It's cooling, yes. It has
Yeah,
a cooling, cleansing quality too, just like water. Yeah.
yes,
So
exactly.
beautiful. Well, I know we have a number of questions here. I can see them, and I know that we've been having a beautiful conversation, and also want to honor some of our guests. If you don't mind, maybe we'll move into some Q&A.
Yeah, let's do it.
Right. Here's a question that I think many people can relate to from Marco. And he says, I'm 61 and unfortunately can't remember what I've dreamed. Is there another way to keep up with my dreams? And, related to this, maybe a lot of people do wake up and they don't remember their dreams and they think they didn't dream at all. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, neuroscience shows we're all dreaming every night. So it becomes a question of dream recall. And one of the ways to stimulate dream recall is to get a journal and have the intention of remembering the dreams and put the pen next to the journal. Because the thing is, when we first wake up, if we're still in that kind of dreamy state, we can write down our dreams. But if we get out of bed and we go and make coffee or something like this, it goes out. We've already shifted into a different part of our processing and we're making to-do lists and all of these things. So to just simply stay in bed, try not to move very much, and write it down is one thing. The other thing for Marco and everybody is I have a much more expanded definition of what is a dream. So it's whatever you wake up with. It might be a color, it might be a snippet of a song, it might be a thought, it might be just one image. It doesn't have to be a story.
Mm.
So getting in the practice of writing that down and just sitting with it, being curious about it is one of the ways that that sort of nurtures the dreaming process. And the more you do that, the more you will have dream recall.
I love that. Thank you for that invitation and reminder that it's not just about remembering the details of the story and the process and the drama of it, but even a simple image or something that just you just wake up with, and to write that down right away before the beta waves start jumping into the brain.
Exactly.
Okay, somebody wants
Exactly.
to know what the picture is behind you on your right side.
Yeah, Jason and I were talking about that before we started this. This picture is a gift from one of my clients who worked with the artist Shepard Fairey, and it's a Shepard Fairey print from San Diego. Jason
Oh, how
knows
neat.
quite well. Yeah,
Hmm,
yeah.
how neat. Yeah, very cool. Um, what's since we're talking about images, I'm just curious, you were given that, but
Why?
it's well, no, it's amazing actually. It's a very cool, it's not something that you see all the time, you know. Um, yeah, curious what that image speaks to for you.
Well, where it really spoke to is we were doing a session one day, and I made the comment, "Rock the Casbah." And this particular client is a musician, and somehow that worked its way into our conversation. And then, yeah, I think it was like a couple of years later, suddenly I get this gift. Shepard Fairey had done this particular print, and it says "Rock the Casbah" on it. So,
Love it.
yeah,
So great. And I think you kind of answered this. This person was asking, well, is there a trick to making ourselves remember our dreams? So you mentioned, don't worry about trying to remember all the details, but just write down what comes to you when you wake up, whatever that is. Anything else you'd like to add to that? Sometimes people might say, well, I don't know, maybe I was just making that up. Maybe I didn't really dream it, but would you encourage people to just write what comes to mind when
yeah. And if you think you're making it up, so what? It's part of your inner inside speaking in some way. So, that sort of judgment or sort of thing that we put on to what we're experiencing on our inside is the thing that we have to kind of set to the side and just allow ourselves to have whatever it is. If I'm making it up, I'm making it up. You know the difference? I'll just pop in and say this. There's a difference between dreaming and fantasy. So, dreaming, I used the phrase spontaneous imagery earlier. Dreaming is that spontaneous images and thoughts and inner experience that is always moving. We're always moving. Everything's moving. The blood in our cells is moving. Everything's in movement. A fantasy is repetitive and fixed and gets stagnant. It's the same scenario over and over, and it feels that way. It feels very flat as opposed to
you
dynamic and vibrant.
Thank you. That is such a really valuable point for us, especially these days as we continue to, use wise discernment, understand our own minds, our consciousness, as well as that of others. Many people are very fond of talking about other people's projections, right? We're really
Yeah.
good at figuring out what a projection is from somebody else,
Yeah.
but can
And
we recognize our own? Yeah.
and that's okay. It's actually quite useful when we start to pay attention to whatever fantasy we have going on to just then say, okay, whoa, here's a mirror. What is this really telling me? And how am I stuck? And what do I want to do with that?
Yeah, I love it. And I love how you describe the embodied experience of it, the energetic vibrational experience of it, and how to discern whether something is a fantasy or whether it's, coming from, a different place through imagery. And so I just want to, see if I got that, really so the quality is kind of the clues here, a fantasy versus a true dream, maybe, include repetitiveness and a sense of flatness. Yeah.
Sense of flatness.
Yeah.
I read this case study in, one of the many psychology papers that passed my desk of this person who would come home from work every day. It was a frontline worker and put on headphones and listen to the same Beyonce playlist and imagine herself singing those same Beyonce songs night after night after night after night. It gets super flat. It's not stimulating. It becomes very repetitive, even obsessive, and just flat. It doesn't move us into a new direction.
Okay, now I have to ask this. This is what's coming to me. How would you relate this conversation to many of the teachings around manifestation? All
So,
the way back to The Secret and, and other folks that, talk about using imagery and dreams to what, in my view, sometimes sound like creating a fantasy into a reality, right? But yet there is, as you said, when you get behind the fantasy, the impulse that's driving that almost obsessive thinking. Um, anyway, more I could say about that. I won't. But I'm curious how you see this relationship, especially in today's times where we have such an overemphasis on the value of materialism.
don't we though? So, when I teach manifesting, I have people take a spoon and hold the end of it in their two fingers and put a raw egg on the end and learn to walk with it. Now, it's holding something lightly. And the thing about fantasies, it's a hard grip.
Mhm.
And if I'm really wanting something to happen and I have such a hard grip, I'm going to cramp around that. And maybe life has changed or I have changed and there's new information coming in and I'm not allowing it to come in. So if I've received something, so for example, I live in France and I didn't choose to live in France, that came through in night dreams. For over a year, I was dreaming in various and sundry ways, go to France. So I had no idea how to manifest that. It's about sort of taking that idea out and what I call walking the dream, kind of like walking the dog, because it's like sniffing around all these little trails while holding lightly to the idea of these little trails. There's going to be one that lights me up on the inside and gets me to France. If that's still what I'm going to be dreaming after I go down these trails, right? And that's very different from just deciding from my thinking as opposed to letting a desire emerge spontaneously. Deciding I need something from my thinking because someone on the outside said that's going to make me happy or is going to change something in my life, whatever, and then cramping around it.
Hmm. I love that. And oh, I love that practice. I'm gonna like do that if I have some kind of a contraction around this. It's so beautiful. The what a beautiful imagery you created with, with your words there around what it means to grasp and to contract around what the mind interprets from a desire that comes deep from within. And so there's nothing wrong with wanting things, and there's nothing wrong with befriending our desires, but when we contract around something and it gets flat and it gets repetitive, then we know that we need to let go. Yeah?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I love it. Beautiful. Thank you. We have some questions about night terrors. And I've noticed this too, that not always just in the elderly, but often in elderly and children, we get these things that we often call night terrors, right? And so this particular person is sharing her story, but maybe many of us can relate to what are night terrors? My mother lost her mom at age 11 and has been having really violent dreams about giant bulls fighting her or fighting off evil. And she says, but clearly, so there's some kind of trauma, that's how the psychological, folks would try to interpret this. So we see this quite often, though, with the elders. These they're fighting something off, and and they're screaming out in the middle of the night, having what we call night terrors, and often children do too. And so I'm curious from your perspective how you view those and how we address them.
Yeah, many times people bring me something and they say it's a night terror, and it's really a nightmare, and it's something that can easily be confronted. For example, some perhaps someone is running from a masked figure, and maybe the waking dream for that would be to re-enter that dream, turn around, and take the mask off. That's happened many, many times in my practice, and taking that mask off. Sometimes it's the person themselves. Sometimes it totally shifts and it's this really wonderful aspect of the self. I had a woman tell me that she had heard this scary man knocking at her door in her dreams every night, and she would get right to the door and then wake up. And then finally, she opened the door and he stood there and said, "I love you." So we often run from
Mhm.
parts of ourselves that at some point in our life we decided, oh, that's not a likable part of me. And we set it aside and we demonize it and we put it somewhere else. But it is a likable part of us. And we're meant to be integrating ourselves and making ourselves whole. And so it's often about simply getting to know that part of ourselves. Other times it might be, for example, a car out of control. And so it's about getting back in the driver's seat. So sometimes night terrors are really nightmares that feel terrifying, and they can simply be, worked with in this way. Children are getting a whole lot of information, and it's a big download. I mean, it's quite an experience to be a soul and squeezed into a body.
Mhm.
And having to figure out, oh my gosh, I've got all these big emotions moving through me and all these big energies. And I feel that night terrors are often around that, just integrating these experiences. I mean, it's a big world that we're put into as kids, and it's a lot to take in, and we have to figure that out and integrate it.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for helping us understand why it might happen, or it appears to happen maybe more for children and elderly, and what are some of the things that could be, taking in a lot of information, trying to consolidate and integrate it. And as we get older, making sure that we are integrating those parts of ourselves that we may have shooed away or not wanted to look at, or just didn't really fully integrate. And that includes facing our fears, right? So when we're fighting off evil or we're fighting off bulls or something like that, maybe to turn to the bull and say, what do you want? Or even, how can I serve you? Right? What about that? Like, or what makes you evil?
Or
You
maybe
know?
you're hungry
Yeah.
and you give the bull some, you know, there's a dream that someone brought of a leopard in a small apartment, and the leopard was really hungry and it needed to be fed. And we have big energies, we have big parts of ourselves that are very creative, that would like to speak up at certain moments, that we push down, that we don't allow, that we let outside thinking come in. Those parts are hungry because we're meant to be, you know, expressing our full self. There's people who've told me I always wanted to play the piano and nobody in my family let me do that. That part is hungry. That
Hmm.
part needs to learn to play the piano.
Many people have recurring dreams of different kinds, and you talked about a few of them. One of our guests here is asking, why do I see a dream where I go to the same place that looks like my workplace and I'm lost on how to get back home? I've dreamt this at least 15 or 20 times as recently as a fortnight ago. So, I think he'd love guidance on his particular dream, but also, for all of us, sometimes we do have these recurrent dreams that aren't quite nightmares and or night terrors, but we keep getting these particular messages. And so, how do we work with that?
Yeah, so if you think about it, every aspect of the dream is an aspect of the dreamer. It's how I've incorporated the experience of my life into me and put image to that. So, my childhood home, my old workplace, these are all parts of me that and memories and experiences that are part of me now. And if I'm there and I can't get back to here, then it's telling me that I'm pulled over there or I'm still a little bit stuck there. I had someone who was dreaming constantly of this one conference room at her work, and we did an imagery exercise to go back to it, and it was a moment where she allowed herself to be overrun for someone else to take a project that had been her pet project.
Mm.
And she left a piece of herself there,
Mm.
right? So when we went back into the dream, she picked up that person and we had a very different experience after that. And then she didn't dream that again.
Amazing. Yeah, amazing. Boy, we have a lot of questions. Let's see. We're gonna do
Okay.
our best, y'all. We're not going. Oh my goodness, more and more and more questions. Well, first of all, Bonnie, before we jump into maybe one more question, um, I just again want to thank you for your wisdom. All of the work that you're continuing to do to inspire new possibilities through dreaming through dreaming,
Thank
the
you.
new possibilities, new leadership. And before we close with the question, just because I want to make sure that we help everyone know where they can learn more from you, what are the best ways that people can contact you?
Yeah, you can find me at bonniebuckner.com. I teach classes at my institute, which is Institute for Dreaming and Imagery.com. And both of those places you can send us an email and check out the classes and see what is interesting to you.
That's great. Yeah, a lot of y'all have personal questions. I really highly recommend that you contact Bonnie and learn from her, so that you can really work with the power of your dreams. Maybe we'll end on this question because it's very related to something that you talk about, right? How, when we transform our dreams as individuals, we can really foster a more peaceful world. And that is literally what this person is asking. I'm having a hard time to accept what's happening in the world. Wars, money-driven world, Palestine, everything. What can I do to manifest a better, peaceful world? And how might we do that through our dreams?
You know, I work with many, many, many people in the social change world. And I have had so many people tell me, I really want to do this work. Some of them are frontline people, they're activists. I really want to, make this change. And then 10 minutes later, they're telling me how much they hate their sister or how terrible the relationship was with their father. So, size, the big, big wars out there, but there's a war in here. And so every time we look inside, we generate light. And every time we go in and we untangle something that is tangled in us and then take it out, there's two steps to dreaming: looking inside and receiving, and then being active with it. Every time I do that on my inside, make a shift in my outer world, then I bring another little piece of peace into this world.
So beautiful. So wise. Yeah, thank you for that. And love what you said. Every time we look inside, we generate light. Every time we look inside, we generate light. And may we use the images that come forth through our dreams to guide us into new ways of being, new ways of reality, new ways of creating beauty and truth in the world, right?
Yeah,
But it all starts with that willingness to look inside and look into our light. Yeah, beautiful.
indeed.
Well, thank you so much, Bonnie, for just a really deeply enlightening and creative conversation today on the power of our dreams. Really, really appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, for listening. May you continue to be guided by all that is reflected in the dream state, in both the waking state and the states of the night. And any parting words from you, Bonnie, we would be very, very thrilled for.
I just want to say thank you very much for having me here and for everybody sending in the questions and really just start writing down your dreams. That's the quickest way to begin to pay attention to the inside.
Mm, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend. Till we meet next time.